Okay, I think we'll just, if anybody from the Farm and Food Business Development team has anything to add, please feel free to. But otherwise, I'm just going to let Dar take it away.
One thing,
Oh,
I might
okay.
add before Dar speaks, one of the issues that we addressed with Arlene's fabulous work in pulling all of this together and cleaning up the lists and everything is what do you do with it? How do you make it actionable? And so the idea of maybe being able to use Market Maker as you'll see, an incredibly actionable, incredibly accessible tool for us that we can we can operationalize that big list a little bit more effectively by working with and through Market Maker. So that was my perspective.
Thanks. I mean, Bob, I think you do a wonderful job of teeing things up and putting things in perspective. So, at any point during this talk, I think feel free to jump in. I know I've met some of you and had a chance to visit with, in fact, many of you. So I'm the situation I'm faced with right now is how much do I go back and go to Market Maker 101 or cut to the chase? So I'm going to kind of flip it around and I'm going to talk a little bit about, to my knowledge or my perspective, how what we do can fit in really well with what you guys are trying to accomplish. Plus, Jamie, what you said about, the whole database maintenance thing, I almost wanted to jump in right there because, that was kind of our challenge way back when we started Market Maker is, how can we enlist technology, not only to help with making it actionable. I think that was the word you used, Bob. I think that was a really good term, but to allow it to make it sustainable as well. So hopefully we can address a lot of those issues. So do I have screen share? Are we good? Everyone see my screen? Okay, good. This is what I start every Welcome to Market Maker presentation with, and I think some of you have probably seen this multiple times, so I'm going to whisk through this as quickly as possible. If you've never been exposed to Market Maker, to summarize, it's a platform that gives farmers better access to markets and vice versa. But, and this is probably more relevant to this group, it's also a network of partnership organizations. And it allows farms and markets to access platforms across, or access markets across multiple platforms. It's also free. And I can talk a little bit about where all that support comes from if you're interested. And it's a LinkedIn for farmers and other businesses in food and ag. So farmers and businesses are our primary stakeholder, but organizations like the ones on this call are also a very important stakeholder group, as are researchers and policymakers. So, more on the logistics side, we centralize a lot of data, detailed information on farms and food-related businesses. This information comes from from the farms and businesses themselves, but we also pair it with secondary data, which is good for any of you on the call that are into like strategic planning or maybe providing technical assistance for producers or businesses that are wanting to map things like food sheds or identify, the competitive environments. This is all geo-referenced data. Market Maker has a lot of data that we generate from scratch, primary data, but we also buy secondary data on businesses that have not yet created profiles in Market Maker. So, for instance, if you're looking for where cold storage is in the state, we have that information. If you're wanting to identify wholesalers or processors, those who haven't voluntarily put their information in the system, we actually purchase that. So that's another benefit to being part of this network is that, we're investing in secondary data that for individual groups can be kind of onerous to work into your budget. And the data that we use, it's not all data, but we try to be selective and identify data that can help build a more agile and resilient food supply chain. So my quick rundown, I think a lot of you folks also know this, started 20 or 2004. So we're on our 24th or our 21st year. 23, I have 22 land grants, but we actually added a new one last year that have helped build this. NGOs and government organizations. It's worth mentioning that Iowa State was our very first land grant partner with University of Illinois to really help create this vision of a sort of a nationally connected network. And then the partner organizations work collaboratively to support the network. They've helped us financially and programmatically. And in exchange, we try to we try to build a value proposition for those partner organizations where it makes sense from a research or resource perspective. And support has come from Farm Bureau, Farm Credit, Farmer Veteran Coalition, state departments of ag. It's a really interesting, eclectic mix of people, but they all share one thing in common, and that's their interest in supporting healthy and agile food supply chains and food systems. So, and I'll explain a little bit later. I have a schema that can explain this a little bit more, but we actually are a network. We were originally a core website, 20 years ago, one website where everybody would go to that destination, and then each state had their own website. Iowa has an Iowa MarketMaker website, but we moved to a different model about 8 years ago. And so now what we do is we provide the technology for 135 different domains that includes websites, plugins, and apps. So there's all different ways that what MarketMaker does can be shared and incorporated into everyone's websites. We have about 750,000 profile views in 2024 across all of the domains. So, the idea is that we can really maximize the exposure to the individual farms and businesses. There's about 40,000 detailed profiles, and by detailed profiles, I mean that those are the profiles of organizations, farms, and businesses that have actually gone in there and created, set up accounts and create a more detailed, granular profile. We have about 1,000 products and services represented in the database. We've expanded that a lot in the last couple of years. Originally, we were just basic food products. And then we started to notice people sort of shoehorning things like Christmas trees and, different types of services. And we finally just expanded the database architecture to include all food and ag related products and services. So now we have 1,000. We've started really doing engagement with like cut flowers. That was a big project last year. So we're always trying to expand our footprint. And bringing in these new products helps do that. So, and the AgMark tool, I'm mentioning that number because we're going to refer to that a little later. AgMark, I think most of you are aware, is an Iowa State run website that's USDA supported. So we get a lot of our support from USDA, and part of that is through the AgMark funding at the federal level from rural development. And they play a very prominent role in giving exposure to a lot of the farms and businesses that are in MarketMaker through this digital network, what we call plugins, and we can talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. So this is the visual, the architecture where MarketMaker is really kind of a hub and spoke model for data. The beauty of this, and I think Jamie will appreciate this, having had to labor over a spreadsheet, is that what this does is it digitizes the data collection process. So what you have, each one of these little nodes, and the size and the color sort of defines the types of organizations they are. Each one of these little nodes is an inception point for data and a dissemination point for data. But what it is it interacts with the farms and businesses that you're trying to collect information on. And so what happens is this data can flow through this network to a centralized data bank. So there's sort of the national aggregate, there's the state level. And so these are an example. Like if you look at Illinois, they have a very extensive network of connected directories where they have local county directories, they have different organizations. It flows into a state directory for Farm Bureau and a number of other groups. But what you have now is you have not only a more fulsome snapshot of what's going on in food and ag in your state, but you then have this network set up so it can be maintained a lot easier. So it just made sense. You know, we spent a lot of years with managing a few of our own owned domains and websites, and those are still very much trafficked. But we didn't want to have to be in the business of competing with other groups that were trying to do the same thing. So what we did was we took a step back, identified technology where we could play a support role, because we feel like no one gains anything by creating these data silos, or worse yet, you know, investing a lot of resources in developing a data set that may very quickly become obsolete. So this is the idea of sort of an organic living data structure that really helps create the blueprint for food and ag, and not only within a state, but across the country. These were our, this is our market maker states or national site. A lot of people think that's all there is. Like I mentioned before, we actually provide technical support for 130 different domains that are connected. But you know, the concept of these plugins is to take components of market makers websites and actually build them into our partner websites, where they can be branded. They, you know, so from the user's perspective, that directory very much belongs to that particular organization. But, you know, the behind the scenes managing of that data, that technology takes place in Market Maker, saves a lot of money for the organizations. This is, I think I got this out of line, but what we have is something called affiliations. I thought I had another slide in there. And those affiliations are the partner organizations. So in this particular search, what you see is Buy Fresh, Buy Local, Homegrown by Heroes, Farmer Veteran Coalition. Those are all organizations that Clarkson Farm is part of. And so they opt into these directories when they create their profile. But what happens then is that information populates those organizations' directories as well. So there's some synergy there. When a person creates a profile, they have all of these different affiliations that they can opt into. I think Joe, you and who else were working on sort of shoring up the Iowa affiliations?
Yeah, several people on this call. Mallory was part of that. Jody was part of that. And I forgive me if I'm leaving off anybody else, but there was about 5 or 6 of us that worked on updating the affiliations so that they're all current and they all have the correct contact information for that affiliation.
Yeah, and this is also an opportunity for each of the organizations represented, the ones that are affiliations, to go in and maybe expand what we call the landing page. Because within Market Maker, we also feature these affiliations where you can go, if I were to hit select, I could go to the live site, but I think for right now, I'll just stick with the slide. If I were to select Illinois Farmers Market Association, it would take me to a landing page that would explain a little bit about the organization. It's an opportunity for that organization to create as much information as they want, sharing about what they do, linking their website. And then what we do is then list all of the Market Maker registered members. They have the option of seeing them in a search. This is important because this is the first step toward populating those individual directories that can be embedded in all of these different affiliate websites.
And Dar, can I add something else on the,
Yes.
excuse me,
Sure.
on the affiliations? Another update that we made that isn't on Dar's slide, because this slide is before we did that, but the affiliations are now sorted by national affiliations and then by state. So when you go into the affiliations, all the Iowa affiliations are listed together under the state of Iowa.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. You know, when this first started, we had a handful of affiliations and it wasn't really that big a deal, but now I have no idea. We have dozens and dozens of affiliations. And so organizing them in a way that makes it easier for the user to find the ones that are relevant to them it seems trivial, but it was a big deal. So it is easier now. The other thing is to make sure that these affiliations are current. I think Iowa, I don't remember when these were set up initially, but I think it was probably 12, 13 years ago. And I think a lot of the affiliations weren't even aware they were part of Market Maker. So what Joe and the rest of you have done is a real service to the website, because now when someone signs up in MarketMaker and they're part of your respective organizations, they can add that to their profile, and the contact person should be getting notified when that happens. We don't have an approval process that's involves, we don't have it set up so that those profiles have to be approved before they can go public, because we have some affiliations that aren't necessarily aren't real vigilant about it. And we don't want to hold people up. But what we will do is you get notified of those people that sign up in your organization. And then if in fact they, for whatever reason, aren't members, we can either remove that affiliation from their profile, or what I think is a better option is to simply reach out to them, explain a little bit more about your organization, and explain what they need to do to formally become part of it. This is more of an issue with some of these organizations that have a subscription.
The other thing that I would like to add, and I'm sorry, Dar, to break.
No, that's all right. I hope everybody joins in. You know better than I do where the gaps are in terms of my information. So
you don't have to have a plugin yet. You can have an affiliation without having a plugin. And so there's no charge to have an affiliation. So if you belong to an affiliation that we don't have in our site or on our site yet, if you'd like to have one, you can just reach out to us and we can add that affiliation. Let us know what logo you want to use, what contact person you want, your website, etc. And then we can get you up and running on our site. And one of the benefits of doing that ahead of getting a plugin is that then you have the population already started. So when you want to, so like PFI, for example, just joined last year, but they had an affiliation with us prior to that. And so when they got their plugin, then they already had X amount of members that were populating their map on their plugin.
Now, this is always, thanks, Joe, that's a good point. This is always the first step. Create the affiliation, make sure that you've got, farms and businesses that have created profiles. And then at some point, and it's pretty subjective, you decide, okay, there's a critical mass here. Let's look into the option of embedding a plugin in our website where that information then gets co-located on on the affiliate's website. So this is the plugin that Joe had talked about. I can't remember at this point. I don't know if has it been a year since it's been up, but I'm trying to remember how many members are actually in there. We signed a lot of people up over the weekend.
It'll be a year in April.
Yeah, so this is, it's a pretty good start in terms of getting people to participate. One of the benefits to that is that in many cases, a lot of these members that are PFI members who we've been able to bring in to the system, if one of these organizations on the call decide they want to have a plugin, PFI may have already done some of the heavy lifting, and it's just a matter of getting those individual farms and businesses to add your affiliation to their profile, and that begins to start to populate the other plugin. I mean, there's a lot of synergy in building out these plugins within a state, and I've had a chance to talk with several of you about this project, which I think is wonderful, by the way, what you're trying to do. And I think that creating these synergies amongst these different organizations, at least from a technology standpoint, can really help sort of coalesce the group and start to build a network, a robust living network. So this is what Illinois has done. They've taken that. We were in a really challenging situation at one point where there were a lot of organizations in Illinois. You had the Chicago organizations, the downstate. They didn't really talk to, they would meet, but they didn't work always extensively with one another. And we had just data silos all over the place. Farmers markets were the worst. And what happened was no one had a database that had any integrity. It was too much work to ask an individual to keep up information for all the different disparate organizations. And Farm Bureau sort of stepped up. They they played a strong, they were a strong leading organization for Illinois. Every state's a little different. And started to pull these different groups together with the experiment of building a network. Now, here's what we've learned. The first one or two are probably the most challenging, because it is a little bit of a new thing, and in some ways kind of scary that you're folding in on something like this, because, you know, data can be a very proprietary thing. But once you get one or two in, the rest falls into place very quickly. And then it's just a matter of you know, trying to coordinate the onboarding of all these different organizations. The end result has been, you know, probably the best database of, especially, you know, specialty growers, because they tend to be under identified in Illinois in this. So it's the best database we've ever had. Farm Bureau uses it for strategic planning, policy purposes. They even use it with legislators. And then as a result, we've got this core group of people that work together to keep that information current. So instead of spending money on technology, instead of spending money on you know, getting on the phone or hiring the intern to update their databases, they kind of work collectively to remind and nudge people it's time to update your profile, which, by the way, you know, having had MarketMaker, probably Illinois MarketMaker, for maybe 12 years, you know, we were sort of in the same situation, always trying to get people to update their profiles. The rate of the update rate went up. I used to know the statistic for this because we had to provide it for USDA, but it went up exponentially in terms of farms and businesses having some fidelity to those profiles and keeping them current, because they will tell you it was one account that supplied directories across the state. They wanted to be part of them, but, you know, even though it's free, time is money. So this was something that was, you know, it went over really well with the farms and businesses, and then it gave all of these organizations the benefit of current data. Plus, they started working together. There's a lot more harmonious collaboration than there was when we first started working in this space.
So can you go
ahead.
back to that, Dar? Sorry. So to clarify, what Farm Bureau did in Illinois, AgMark has started and PFI has started in.
I do have that. I do
Okay.
have that. Yeah, I'm going to talk about
Okay.
the scope for that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So that's what that was. In fact, that's what I was going to right now. So AgMark, the fact that AgMark's in Iowa is a real benefit. One, they've been an awesome partner. They're a national partner, but you know, they have an interest in seeing what you guys are doing advanced. And so what they've done, first of all, there's the Food Searcher tool, which I mentioned how many views it gets. If you go onto the AgMark website, they have these market pages, these summaries by product and by business types. And I think there's a team at Iowa State that creates like a market report. I can't remember what the name of that team is. And in addition to that, they bring in researchers from around the country to provide intelligence, market intelligence, and sort of a summary about, you know, apples, agritourism, Christmas trees. Excuse me, I've got a tickle. This is an example of the Apple Food Searcher page and what it's powered by MarketMaker. So those individuals who sign up in MarketMaker that have apples then populate this Food Searcher tool. And as I mentioned before, this is really, it's a real bonus extension of market access because of the amount of traffic that they get. It's a great partnership. So every so many years, we have a scope of work that we work with AgMark on what is MarketMaker going to do to support the overall agenda initiative of AgMark. This, of course, is also approved at the Rural Development USDA level. So for this latest scope of work, we have Food Searcher tool expansion. I think that just rolls over every year, but scaling and documenting MarketMaker API-driven in-state network model. I didn't come up with that name. I think Courtney Long did, but catchy title. But essentially what it is funding the scaling of what the experiment in Illinois to provide resources to see what it would take to scale that model. And I believe they had Iowa specifically in mind for that. I don't want to speak for Courtney, but this work that you guys are doing with building this network through collaboration and organization, sort of grassroots, this would be providing the technology to support that would fit in well with the scope of work that AgMark has identified. And then the other is to refresh and improve the quality of the quality secondary data. So that gets into sort of the strategic planning part of it, the research part of it. That also is an ongoing role that MarketMaker plays. That's probably more relevant to those of you who are actively involved in research or technical assistance, but it's still what we consider an important role. I'm going to mention this just real quickly. I don't know how many of you work in urban areas at all, but we have an agreement, a cooperative agreement with NRCS. They have an urban ag pilot. The reason I mention it is because, again, with that scope of work, we're developing technology and features that I think could play well with you guys as well. One of them is, to facilitate donations connections, i.e. They want to see urban, and when they say innovative producers, they're talking about like under roof, controlled environment, rooftop, that sort of thing, and including community gardens. They want to see them connect to food assistance programs. They mention food banks and food pantries in their scope, but even that's farm to school, it could be preschool. They define that pretty broadly. Facilitate market connections. So we're supposed to upgrade our site to better facilitate market connections, or engage in projects like this one that could help facilitate market connections. Again, that kind of plays into what you guys are doing, I think. Support historically underserved communities. Those of you who, I think some of the university folks that are on the call, we all have sort of a mandate to try to better serve some of these what USDA calls underserved producers. And so what we've done now is we've built into our database the ability to identify where those underserved producers, if you are in fact an underserved producer, including farmer veterans. Why that may be relevant is if you guys are involved at all with the local food purchasing program, where USDA wants to see a more deliberate effort to source to some of these communities. MarketMaker has now incorporated some features that make that a little easier, and then expand networks through outreach. This again is, NRCS loves to see some of the things like the work that you guys are doing, because you've done such a great job of building an in-state network. And then our charge is to find a way to better support that type of effort. So a derivative of the urban ag project, which I think also then has benefits across other efforts, is that we have a new buy-sell forum plugin. So if you're familiar with MarketMaker, if you go to the state sites and the national site, there's something called the buy-sell forum. It operates a little like a Craigslist, or more, I guess let's update it, more like a marketplace, a Facebook marketplace. But the listing is for everyone in the country. We talked a little bit about the plugins and how they work. Well, this buy-sell forum is sort of an offshoot of that, where we can now develop a buy-sell forum that's very unique to an organization or a geographic location. So it could be a statewide buy-sell forum. It could be an organizationally based. I mean, if PFI wanted to do a buy-sell plugin, that would be a good example. So what we would do is it would only feature those ads of those organizations. Some of the other features related to buy-sell is, and this is again new as part of the upgrade, is that you can now filter, you can get on the main sites and filter by location, product, etc. So it isn't a matter of scrolling through all the ads all the time to see if anything's relevant. One of the things the buy-sell form does is it pushes out emails or notifications when an ad's posted. That again became a little, it became too much for some people because they don't want to see everything that's being posted around the country. So now we have the capacity for a person to set up a preference profile where, so for instance, if you're farm to school, I only want to see wholesale farmers, or I may only want to see wholesale produce posted from Iowa. Or I'm trying to think of other examples, or, you know, I only want to source from veterans. So, you know, any ads put out by veterans, that sort of thing. We're adding SMS notification. I've seen some chatter in our own internal webs or discussion board about how we're working toward that. You know, we've discovered, you know, that farmers don't always check their emails. So we have an internal notification system that's based on emails, which is we're not going to get rid of it, obviously, but we need to add SMS notifications. So if somebody, you know, wants to, wants to buy something, they can notify directly with SMS. Now this goes both ways, and I think it's need on here as well. So if you have a food bank that's in need of, tomatoes or something like that, you know, they can post that need, and then as part of this notification process, that information can be pushed to tomato growers in the area.